We are glad to welcome everybody. Today we're here to listen to Sripad Mahayogi Prabhu about the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Mahayogi Prabhu is a truth seeker who has been on this way for more than 45 years, and he was a disciple of one of the saints of the 20th century, Sridhar Maharaj, and also Govinda Maharaj, and he was the author and the compiler of the books by Sridhar Maharaj, 5 great books. He is also editing and publishing books about spiritual path and about spiritual world. And so now he's with us, and he will tell us about the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Well, thank you all for joining us again this morning. I'm very happy to be with you all. And I appreciate so much you're giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. The 5th chapter is relatively short, so we'll try to finish the whole thing in one session. There's different ways to look at the 5th chapter. It is titled a little bit differently according to the commentary. Srila Prabhupada has it as Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness, whereas normally the chapter title is Sannyas Yoga. So that's kind of interesting, the idea that Sannyas Yoga and Karma Yoga are the same thing. But as we'll see in this chapter, practically speaking, when Krishna speaks of Sannyas Yoga, the idea that he's promoting is very similar to what he's already said about Karma Yoga. So the chapter begins with a question by Arjuna. Arjuna Vacha, Sannyasam Karmanam Krishna, Punarjogam Cha Sangshasi, Yachstreya Etayor Ekam, Tanme Bruhi, Sunishchita. Arjuna says, well, I don't really understand. You're telling me that karma is a bad thing. And then again, you tell me I'm supposed to do karma, but as some kind of an offering to God. This is confusing for me. How can I both do karma and then not do karma? Please explain to me more clearly. Now, it may be thought that Arjuna really understands exactly what Krishna is saying, since after all, Arjuna is Krishna's friend and he's a highly developed soul. So perhaps he's only asking this for our benefit. But then again, it's very confusing. Now, today, when people talk about karma, they think this is some kind of a far-out New Age idea. It's some sort of a quaint philosophy for hippies, yogis, people who don't live in the real world. I'm always being told that I don't live in the real world. When I was completely dedicated as a Hare Krishna devotee, no matter what I did, it wasn't in the real world. Now I work as a teacher and a professor at a university, but university is not the real world. So we understand the real world is where you're out making a profit, you're out making money, you're being a success. So people think of this idea of karma as being very remote from our experience. It's something that New Age hippies talk about. After all, modern thinkers after Nietzsche have pretty much adapted to the idea that God is dead. And since God is dead, then the idea of good and evil, sin and piety, or even an afterlife, it's just a big joke. So people think, well, karma, it's for cappuccino drinkers, tea drinkers, vegetarians. Real men who live in the real world understand that this is a jungle. And in the real world, might makes right. It's all about survival of the fittest. Only the strong survive. Never mind that evolutionary biologists have established the importance of cooperation as part of the whole paradigm of natural selection. Species who adapt to working in teams and groups actually have a better chance of survival and reproduction than the lone wolf. If you think about wolves as a symbol, the wolf pack is emblematic. So the wolf is one of the most ferocious animals in the forest. If you think about survival of the fittest and only the strong survive, the wolf is a good symbol of that. But wolves, like dogs and human beings, are social animals. The way they hunt is really a perfect example of cooperation. In fact, not only animals in the jungle, but even plants cooperate with one another. So why should we believe that competition is the best, most natural, superior basis for a society? So the word karma, it has multiple meanings. Normally, we think of karma as action and reaction. So if I do some bad karma, I'll get a bad reaction. So I have to avoid that. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is defining karma in different ways. In the broadest sense, karma means work, but it also means action. And so we know that in the physical world, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, according to Isaac Newton. But even apart from the laws of motion, actions also have moral and ethical consequences, at least for human beings. So an action may be good or evil, moral or immoral, ethical or unethical, legal or illegal, appropriate or inappropriate, according to the values of the society in which that action is performed. So all this refers back to karma. Karma can be good or evil, moral or immoral, ethical or unethical, legal or illegal. But to really bring it home so that we understand exactly what we're talking about when we talk about karma, think about money. It's interesting, I live in Mexico, and when people get together, they like to talk about their families, different fiestas that are going on, food, and so many things. But whenever two Americans come together, the first thing they talk about is money. How much money do you have? How much money are you making? Money, 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 money. Where can you invest your money? What's a good percentage to get on your investment? How do you avoid paying taxes? So in modern society, money is valued. People with more money are rich. They enjoy a high social status, and the wealthy live in fine homes, and they're above the law. If a wealthy man is accused of a crime, he can pay good lawyers and good attorneys to help him escape the law. We hear about the wealthy 1% reported in the news daily. We hear about someone buying a chocolate sundae ice cream covered in gold, valued at thousands of dollars, or spending nights in a hotel room that costs $1,000 a day. It's the same bed, it's the same pillow. You get the same 8 hours of sleep. So what is the point of these thousands and thousands of dollars? It's to create envy. And wealthy people are envied, so much so that they're worshipped as if they were gods. So my point that I'm trying to make is that if karma represents action, and if action has a money value, in a certain sense, money represents stored karma. So where you get your money and what you do with your money, that's what karma is. Another way to look at that is exploitation. So if karma is related to money in terms of exploitation, the more you exploit, the more money you get, then someone who's wealthy in terms of money is holding an obscene quantity of karma. But in the society where money is the only value, no one questions this. No one questions the profit motive or the money culture of our modern karmic society. So the assumption is made that the best and only way to run a society is to base it on the profit motive. The progress of a third world country is measured according to gross domestic product. And economic growth represents the rise of GDP. So to grow an economy constantly, it's necessary to cannibalize our precious natural resources. And this leads to the destruction of the environment, the destruction of native cultures, the impoverishment of its citizens, the destruction of their health. But none of this is important. What is important in the karma society is economic growth, generating more karma, more income through exploitation. And so all the different modern societies today, be they capitalist, socialist, or third world, base themselves on karmic exploitation, on harvesting a profit in dollars, Deutschmarks, rubles, pesos. Modern societies are based on exploitation, the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest. So what this leads to is an obscene accumulation of wealth at the top, coupled with the worst kind of corruption and the destruction of any other value system. So now we live in a world that's crippled by economic devastation, pandemics, narco-trafficking, drug addiction, unemployment, and a complete collapse of all these different 20th century systems that held things in a precarious balance. Socialism is another form of exploitation. So socialism, capitalism, these different forms that center on unlimited growth based on unlimited karmic exploitation are in fact on the point of collapse. It's interesting that after the First and Second World Wars, even the most rapacious of the robber barons and their corporations, they understood the need for a certain mitigation of poverty. But in our new surveillance society, it's all about control. So even the very pretense of compassion has fallen away. Compassion is for losers, according to businessmen like Trump or Putin. Strong men do not need compassion. They need hard work. They need to energize the system, but with more karma, more profit, more exploitation. So what's the alternative? What if there is an alternative? What if we valued something other than profit? So right now, in the first years of the 21st century, we're witnessing the collapse of the exploitation society. We're seeing the collapse of the society that's based on karma. It's becoming very clear that you cannot base a civilization on squeezing a profit out of everything. There must be a restructuring of our values, or we'll be reduced to cannibalism, which is what is predicted for the end of the Kali Yuga age. But what if we valued something besides money? And we're not saying that money or karma is the root of all evil, but how do you make your money? And what do you do with it? We're trying to point out that you cannot value exploitation and sense pleasure above all other values. So here in the 5th chapter, Arjuna, he's telling Krishna, okay, now I understand karma is bad. I want to renounce all work. But Krishna tells him this is not a feasible solution either. You cannot renounce all work. There's a certain cycle called Bhagavad Gita, which means if you try to renounce everything, one day you'll turn around and you'll want it all back. The big commercial department stores, corporations, they understand all this. That's why first they push everyone to buy Christmas presents. And after you buy presents for your whole family, then you feel like, I just gave everything to my family. What about me? Now it's my turn. So beginning in January, they have big sales on everything. So you can run out and buy something for yourself. So if you renounce everything in the beginning for your family, then suddenly you think, oh, well, now it's my turn. And this is the cycle of Bhagavad Gita. You can give everything up for a while, but later it will boomerang back. And you want to enjoy. So the cycle of enjoyment and renunciation, it just goes on and on. Krishna does not recommend trying to renounce everything. There's some reasons for that we'll get to. On the other hand, Krishna says we should dedicate ourselves to God through service, using the work that we can do. So he's not criticizing the idea of work, but he's trying to incorporate the idea of service. So the real purport then of the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is the principle of renunciation, of attachment for action. In other words, giving up the profit. He's trying to explain karma as service, and the idea of giving up the fruits of work, not the idea of giving up work altogether. So Arjuna asks him this question. He says, you asked me to renounce work, but then you recommend work with devotion. So which is better? And Krishna says, Sannyasa karma yogas cha nishrayayas karavubo tayos tu karma sannyasa karma yogo vishishyate. He says sannyasa karma yoga is good. But work and devotion is also good. Of the two, work and devotional service is better. That's Srila Prabhupada's translation. He says, one who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is really renounced. Such a person, free from dualities, overcomes material bondage and is liberated. So, he's explaining that real karma yoga is the same as nishkama karma yoga. You know, karma tyag is not the purport of what he said in the 4th chapter. And karma sannyas and karma yoga are practically the same thing. Now, it's important to mention here that the idea of sannyas, as it's being discussed in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, is not what we call sannyas today, where one renounces all connection with the material world, all connection with the family, has a shaved head and tilak 24 hours a day, and effectively gives up the world in order to preach Krishna consciousness. That's not the kind of sannyas yoga that Krishna is talking about. After all, the order of sannyas as it's practiced today was founded by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the early part of the 20th century. So when we look at an ancient text like the Bhagavad Gita, it's important to see the language of the Gita, the Sanskrit, the lexicon, in terms of what it meant 2,000, 3,000 years ago, and also in light of the commentaries. So what he's focusing on here in the word sannyas is giving up activities or becoming idle, if you like. And so if it's a question of idleness or action, Krishna is saying here action in Krishna consciousness is much better than mere idleness. If you simply sit as a sadhu and don't move and control your breath, this is not really a sufficient idea of what it means to give up the world. It's more difficult to work in the world and not be attached. So these are some of the ideas found here. So renunciation of action is not the same as acting in Krishna consciousness. That's why Srila Prabhupada titles this chapter, Action in Krishna Consciousness. He says, so, only the ignorant speak of devotional service or karma yoga as being different from Sankhya yoga, which is translated as the analytical study of the material world. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself to one of these paths achieve the results of both. So the point is, if you are capable of analyzing your position in the world and understanding I'm spirit soul, God is the supreme soul, my relationship with God then should be one of service. Then you'll come to the same conclusion that we've already mentioned, that karma yoga and buddhi yoga, nishkama karma yoga, all these different terms refer to returning to your constitutional position as a servant of God. In other words, dedicating your action to God. You cannot escape action. It's impossible. So act for God, dedicate your work to God. This should be the conclusion of knowledge or Sankhya. He says, one who knows the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. Yapashati sapashati. Sannyasas tu mahabaho dukam aptum ayogataha. Merely renouncing all activities not yet engaging in devotional service of the Lord cannot make one happy. So sometimes we think that by renunciation, we'll become happy by giving up all these things that are negative. But mere renunciation alone will not lead us to happiness. A thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vigatma vijitatma jitendriya sarva bhutatma bhutatma kurvan api nalipyate. So he says one who's yoga yukta. So yukta means connected, like yukta vairagya. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul and controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So you can think of, not to be imitated, because imitation is dangerous. We don't want to become sahajas, but If you think of Ramananda Roy, he's a teacher, he's training dancing girls, but his mind is devoted to Krishna 100%. So although he's always working, he's never entangled in karmic reaction. So this is nice to hear for devotees who work outside the temple. It doesn't mean that you have to spend all your time making flower garlands or grinding sandalwood paste to adorn the head of the deity. There are many different activities that one may perform according to your quality and your capacity. The idea is that we should work without being attached to the results and try to do service. So sometimes that means in Los Angeles Temple, when I was there, we had 25 cars. Someone had to work on the cars. So there was a temple mechanic. And when he came to Mangal Arti or the evening Arti, he had dirt under his fingernails and smelled of diesel oil. We were working with gasoline, changing carburetors. It doesn't seem like something mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but without his work, the devotees couldn't drive to the flower market to buy flowers for the deities. So Srila Prabhupada, just to give the example that in the old days of Indian railways, they had a cartoon with a figure of a wheel, a train wheel, that said, keep the wheel turning. Because everyone in the Indian Railway Company had a little job to do, but in the end, it all contributed to seeing that the wheels kept turning. So we try to take shelter of Guru Dev and find out what sort of service can I do to help keep the wheels turning. This is more the idea of renunciation or karma sannyasa yoga that's being promoted here in the 5th chapter. So Krishna gets more specific. He says, a person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself or herself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So this is also a kind of sannyas or renunciation, remaining aloof from the experiences of the senses. He says, one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results to the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action as the lotus leaf is untouched by the water. So this gets to the point of free will. Does the jiva act or not? Kind of an interesting question. Here, Krishna's almost saying that the jiva doesn't really do anything. He's caught in a web of reality created by the 3 modes of nature, almost as if he's in a dream, and the world is swirling about him. And his senses are interacting with the world almost mechanically. Now, we know that the soul has free will, but it's true that sometimes we go through our day almost mechanically to the point where we don't even really remember specifically so many events of the day. What time did I catch the bus this morning? Was it 8:29 or 8:28? How many people got on and off the bus? I don't pay attention to these things. Did I put on green socks or red socks? Not so important. Somehow we go through our day. We wake up, brush our teeth, take a shower, put on our shoes and socks, get dressed, go out into the world, catch the bus, go to the place, do the thing, catch the bus home. And it's one day melts into another day with very few real independent decisions being made. We're acting and reacting almost on automatic pilot. So it's as if we're caught in this web of reality that's been spun by the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But at the same time, somehow we've accepted this path. We've chosen the path of illusion and ignorance. Somehow the soul has developed this perverted ego, this ahankara, and as a consequence, this material body. Krishna says the steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Fale sakto nibadyate. And then it's interesting to me, Krishna's always mentioning this word fruit. And in Spanish, the word for enjoyment is disfrutar. And I always hear people, disfrute su vida, enjoy your life. And I'm thinking, no, that's not Krishna's message. Krishna's message is offer me the fruit. So, when the embodied living being controls his nature, sarva karmani manasa sannyasaste sukhambhashi, and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, neither working nor causing work to be done. So this is the path of divine realization, surrendering oneself to God and allowing oneself to be used as an instrument of God. It says residing in the city of 9 gates. It means there's 9 apertures in the body. It's kind of like a city, and the soul resides within this city. So if you dedicate the work of your body and mind to God, then you can reside in the city of 9 gates, free from karmic reaction, and experience real happiness. Real happiness is not a question of how much drinking you can do, or how many drugs you can take, how much sex you can have, or how fast you can run. Real happiness develops as a consequence of dedication. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. So, this is kind of an interesting question. He's saying, you do not create activities. Na kartrit vam, na karmani, na karma phala samyogam. You don't really make any karma. So then how do we suffer karma if we don't make any karma? But karma flows from ahankara, or a false ego, the idea that I am the doer. The soul is responsible for his entrance into the land of exploitation. And once here, we're like a ship tossed on a storm. But there's consequences. The waves may take us up, the waves may take us down, but we're caught in the waves. We're trapped in this dream of egoism. And so we're subject to the threefold miseries. And this is independent of God's will towards all living beings. God is not guilty of any injustice. He's not responsible for the evil that we do. Srila Sridhar Maharaj points out, he says on this particular verse, Nakartrit vam nakarmani lokasya srijati prabhu nakarma phala sanyogyam svabhavas tu pravartate. Sridhar Maharaj says the soul is responsible for his entrance into the land of exploitation. Bhagavad Gita notes that the jiva is responsible for entering into the land of exploitation. The first awakening of freedom or free will is from the non-specified position when the jivas are all jumbled together. The undifferentiated character, the glowing only of the Brahmajyoti. They're coming with some kind of free will. By free choice, they're going this side and that side. So the idea is that as eternal spirit, at some point, the spirit becomes covered or colored with some desire for independence. We want to play God. We don't want to serve God. We want to play God. We realize we have some divine nature. So with that divine nature, I think, well, what if I could play God? And so they come to the side of the material world where they want to play God. But we really don't have that much independence once we come in contact with the three modes of material nature, or Maya, as it's been set up. We get involved in the machine. But we have our free will to escape this machine. Otherwise, Krishna will be responsible for their distressed condition. Krishna says here, he says, I'm not responsible for the activities of the jiva. I've given them some freedom and they're working freely. The clash between them is the cause of their disturbance. But when they leave their wholesale attention to their social activity and come to me, they will get relief from all. So Sridhar Maharaj explains the responsibility is with the soul. Otherwise, the Lord would be responsible for his distressed condition. This is often an argument made by the atheists, that if God is good, why do we have earthquakes and plagues and pandemias? If God is good, then why does a volcano erupt and kill innocent children? But our responsibility for being within this world is with us. Krishna says the soul's innate free will is responsible for his entanglement in the material world. The soul is conscious, and consciousness means endowed with freedom. Because the soul is atomic, his free will is imperfect and vulnerable. So the result of free choice is that some are coming into the material world, some are going to the spiritual world. Once upon a time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was asked by a famous Indian political leader, Shyamasundar Chakravarti, why has the Lord granted such freedom to the jiva? And Prabhupada told him, you're fighting for freedom. You're an Indian freedom fighter. Don't you know the value of freedom? Devoid of freedom, the soul is only matter. This is a very interesting point. If you try to kill a mosquito, the mosquito will resist, even a fly. Why? It has a minuscule amount of freedom, and it's fighting for its freedom to live. Whereas a material object, like a glass of water, if you throw it to the ground, it will shatter. It has no freedom to fight for itself. So devoid of freedom, the soul is only matter. Freedom offers us the alternative to do right or wrong. Once Gandhi told the British authorities, we want freedom. And the British, they said, you're not fit to have self-government. When you're fit, we shall give it to you. But finally, Gandhi said, fit or not fit, we want the freedom to do wrong. That was an interesting point. Freedom implies the freedom to do wrong. So freedom does not guarantee only acting in the right way. Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, he says, freedom has its value independent of right and wrong. Free will is only absolute with the absolute truth. Because we're finite, our free will is infinitesimal, and the possibility of making mistakes is there. So our first choice was to dominate, and gradually we've entered this world of domination. And as a result of this first action, everything else has developed. So Krishna says, Narate kaschachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhu agyane navritam ganam tenamuyanti jantavaha. He says, the Supreme Lord does not assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their true knowledge. So, this is a little different idea than the idea of sin. In the Bible, Adam and Eve are the creators of original sin because they steal and eat the apple from the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. And so that original sin is passed on to all human beings, unless they're saved by the sacrifice of the blood of Jesus Christ. But we don't hold to that because that implies something important. If we're all born with the stain of original sin, it means human beings are naturally evil. But this is not the Vedic point of view. We don't hold to the idea that everyone is naturally evil. Not at all. We say that the soul is naturally good. The natural position of the soul is eternal bliss and knowledge, Satchidananda. So it's not that we're born in sin, but rather we're covered by a kind of ignorance that's based on false ego. So the problem is not so much with sin as it is with the ego. As a consequence of the ego, we do things that are bad karma, vikarma, akarma, according to the position of the society in which we live. But that's not really the same as sin. So Krishna says here, embodied beings are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Agyane navritam gyanam tena muyanti jantavaha. Muyanti means bewildered. So he says, Gyanena tu tada gyanam yesham nashitam atmana tesham aditya vajganam prakashayati tatparam. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So as long as one tries to play God or considers himself God, gradually he becomes covered by ignorance. But real knowledge can be developed through the association of the sadhus. And with that kind of association and knowledge, faith will begin to develop. And with faith, then gradually one will come to the position of bhakti and Krishna consciousness. Tad buddhayas, tad atmanas, tat nishtas, tat parayanag. Gachchanti apunar avritam jnana nirduta kalamasha. He says, when one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path to liberation. And Prabhupada comments that one whose mind, intelligence, faith, and refuge are always in Krishna or in other words, one who is fully in Krishna consciousness, is undoubtedly washed clean of all misgivings. And then Krishna begins to describe, well, how does one see who is in this kind of consciousness? What sort of vision can you expect? And he says, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavi Hashtini Shuni Chaiva Svapake Cha Pandita Samadarshina. He says, a pundit, one who's developed this kind of wisdom, has a special sort of vision, or yoga vision, or samadarshan, where he can see God within a Brahmin, within a Chandala, a cow, an elephant. He'll be able to see every living being has a spark of consciousness that is divine, and the Paramatma is everywhere. And so Prabhupada comments, a Krishna conscious person does not make any distinction between species or castes. And this is very revealing, because oftentimes the criticism comes that, well, in India, people discriminate against untouchables, outcasts, people who are not Brahmins. But here Krishna is saying, if you develop the sort of consciousness that I'm advocating, if you develop transcendental vision, then you'll be able to see everyone equally as a divine spirit soul, covered with different levels of ignorance, perhaps, just as he gave earlier in the second chapter. He says, just as a mirror is covered by dust, or smoke is covered, fire is covered by smoke, or an embryo is covered by the womb. There's different levels of covering. The embryo in the womb is very deeply covered. You can't see the embryo. You can detect the existence of the embryo. You see, well, this is a pregnant woman. There must be a baby inside there somewhere, but I don't know if it's a male or a female. I know nothing about it. Smoke covering a fire, you know there's a fire there. You can't necessarily see the fire because of all the smoke. Or an image in a mirror covered by dust. That's not so bad. You can see the image a little bit, but it's covered by dust. So the soul, according to the level of ahankara that it's developed, becomes covered by different kinds of ignorance. Tamagun, Rajagun, even Sattvagun. These are sorts of mayic coverings, material coverings, that make it difficult to distinguish the divine spark. But a pundit, a learned person, one who's developed transcendental knowledge, can see the divine spark, even though it's covered. Krishna continues. He says, "Ichaiva tayra jita sargo, yesham samyeshtitam mana, nirdosham hi samam brahmam, tasmad brahmani te ishtita." She says, those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. If you have this kind of vision, then you're beyond samsara. They're flawless, like spiritual reality, and they're situated in spiritual reality. The word Brahman gets translated differently, but spiritual reality is a good translation. Na prarishet priyam prapyam, no dvijet prapya cha priyam, stira budhir asamudo, brahmavid brahmanishtita. So in this sort of spirit of detachment, one becomes free from lamentation and joy. Joy may come to you. Something might make you happy, and something might make you sad. But this is not your only reason for living, you become indifferent to that. Now, that doesn't mean that you're so renounced that you negate everything in the world. You negate affection, you negate love, you negate humanity. Not at all. In fact, a Krishna conscious person develops compassion because we can see how other living beings are suffering. We want to help them. The sacrifice for this age is the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we want to help people realize their inner self by giving them the mantra. But that doesn't mean that we're hard-hearted towards other people. One of the problems with renunciation, and one of the reasons why Krishna does not advocate renunciation, is that renunciation tends to make the heart very hard. And one of the problems that sometimes we see is that it's easy to think of oneself as being highly pious, and in that sense become angry with other people. I saw the other day someone was pointing out that a very sincere, very humble brahmachari takes sannyas, and he's given a sannyas name. And then he wants everyone to call him Maharaj. And if they don't call him Maharaj, he becomes angry. If someone says, so Prabhu, would you like prasadam now? And the sannyasi says, it's not Prabhu, it's Maharaj. Call me Maharaj. Then the person was saying, well, we say Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu. So if Prabhu is good enough for Nityananda and Prabhu is good enough for Advaita, what's wrong with calling so-and-so Prabhu? Why does he get angry if I say Prabhu instead of Maharaj? After all, Prabhu means Lord. It's a very high title. So one of the problems with renunciation then is the ego of renunciation. I give up the world and then I think, ha, I have renounced the world. Look at me. So Krishna's advocating against this sort of ego. He says, such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. But keep in mind, Krishna is saying you can do this while you're working. He's not telling you to give up work. He's saying go ahead and work, but develop this higher consciousness, develop this yoga vision, offer your work to me. That's the key, not to renounce the world and then develop a big ego thinking I have renounced. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So the key here is to take delight in material things. That doesn't mean that there's no joy in life. You can understand, this is giving me joy. This is giving me pain. But Krishna consciousness gives me greater joy, gives me greater ecstasy. So Krishna says, Shaknoti haiva yat shadum prak sharira vimokshanat kama krodho bhavam vayagam sayukta sa sukhi nara. So in this verse, he's saying you should give up desire and anger, because these things are born of ego. And that's also found in the Upadeshamritam of Rupa Goswami. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. And those who are beyond dualities that arise from doubt, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So, Srila Prabhupada points out that to do welfare work is all right, but preaching Krishna consciousness is the best sort of welfare work, not simply ministering to the physical welfare of human society. But again, that does not mean that we're against helping people, at least from my point of view. I don't want to differ with Bhaktisiddhanta was critical of doing mundane charity or mundane welfare work. But while that's true, I think the attitude of Govinda Maharaj was very generous. And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with trying to help other people, even if that help is only temporary. I think in terms of the relative world, helping other people is better than hurting other people. So sometimes in the name of Krishna consciousness, we may try to, we think preaching is everything. Preaching is the most important thing. So if I hurt other people in the course of my preaching, that's all right. I don't think that's really a very good standard by which to live. I think that it's good to set a standard by your own personal behavior, so that, for example, say you're involved with some woman and she's not very Krishna conscious, and then you see a younger, prettier, sweeter woman who seems to you to be more Krishna conscious, so you leave your wife for the other woman. This is not the sort of thing that's really being promoted. So I think personally, and this is my opinion, that it's all right to be kind to others. After all, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trinada pisu nichena tarora pisu hishnatnena amanina manadena. Means offering respect to others, being kind to others. It's good. Be tolerant when they're not kind to you. Accept a certain amount of humility. It's good for you. So Krishna says here, if you're above different dualities, pleasure and pain, love and hate, joy and sorrow, but absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then you're assured of achieving the higher domain. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. And you can see again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions anger very specifically. He mentions kama, which is lust or desire, greed. Self-discipline, in fact, is easy. Anyone can fast. Anyone can spend a long time without eating or without sleeping. It's a very easy thing to do. But to give up anger is very difficult. So I'm going to give you an exercise for homework. I want you to try and pass 24 hours without getting angry with another person, even mentally. Try it and see what happens. Just when you're about to get upset and angered, check yourself and think, well, you know, Krishna says those who are free from anger. Because I know what happens when I read the Bhagavad Gita. I go down the list. Free from anger? Yeah, that's me. Free from material desires? Me again. Self-realized? Me. Self-disciplined? That's me. Okay, endeavoring for perfection? Me again. Assured of liberation? I'm good. So now I can exploit people, insult people, do whatever I want, because Krishna says I'm assured of liberation. But be careful. See if you can go through one day being free from anger. Then Krishna begins describing the yoga system. He says, shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breath between the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So again, he does talk about breath control and practicing yoga, but the focus is become free from fear and anger. And fear is a powerful motivator. I'm told that social media works on the basis of fear and anger. You look at a post on social media and you go, oh, I want that. That looks good. So desire. And then you see something from someone else and you say, ooh, I don't like that. I hate that. And you become angry. And then you see someone is really promoting something you hate and you're afraid. And you say, oh, I'm afraid of that. What will happen? What will happen? And as long as you're thinking, what will happen, then you want to turn the page, click on the next thing to be clicked on, and you're in, you're captured, you're trapped. So Krishna is saying, if you want to be trapped in the material world, then try to satisfy your desires. If you want to be trapped in the material world, learn to fear and hate. And if you want to be trapped in the material world, become angry. But if you want to become free from those things, that's the purpose of yoga. Practice some yoga, become free from fear and desire and anger, and you'll find peace. And he concludes the chapter with this verse, which is a very powerful verse. He says, Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gatvamam shantim richchati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So this is a big verse, because when Krishna says, Bhoktaram jagya tapasam, he's saying the purpose of sacrifice, the purpose of tapasya, austerity, is Krishna. Bhoktaram, I am the enjoyer. Raso Vaisa, I am the original enjoyer. I'm by himself. You know, God is by himself and for himself. So when you understand that, and when you're, I hate to use the word sacrifice now, because I was told it has a different meaning. But when your sacrifice is aimed towards me, then it will be perfect. And with that, he ends the chapter. So I promised to do one chapter in 1 hour, and I'm sorry if I'm talking fast, but I'm trying to cover the material. So, any questions? Everyone is just... I see Dandi Maharaj is over there doing his laundry.
Hare Krishna.
Dandi Maharaj, Hari Bol, how are you? Good to see you. We've got a good crew today. There's Ja Wheels.
Yes.
Ja Wheels. And Tungarasi Dasi and iPhone 108. Suvashina is here. And a big shout out to Suvashini over there in Ireland. Damayanti Didi. Madhavi Lata is here from Odessa. Ananta Shesh from Spain. Bienvenido. Vrindavan Chandra from Odessa. I always get Odessa confused with Odisha or Oriya, in India where Jagannath Puri is, Odessa. It must be beautiful there in Odessa, though. I've seen photos. Yeah, it's on the sea, I think. It's on the water. Dandi Maharaj, are you in Odessa, Kiev, Moscow, Petersburg?
I'm still in Kiev.
You're in Kiev. All right.
Yes. Two years already. I am in Kiev.
For
Without
2
leaving.
years?
Yes.
Oh, I always think of you in Petersburg. I didn't know. Kiev. How's the weather? Is it cold?
Yes. December, winter. Yes.
Сегодня холодно. I don't know, maybe that's not Ukrainian, right? But сегодня холодная погода. Yeah? Холодная. That's it. Сегодня холодная погода. It's cold. I learned that. Thank you. All right. There's Vrindavan Chandra. So, I'm talking to put something down for the record in case in 50 years someone looks at this, because the internet is eternal. So there's 29 verses, I think, in the 5th chapter. Is that right? Let me check my book. Yeah. There's 29 verses, but these verses are very deep. They're loaded with lots of meaning and open to a certain amount of interpretation. So I'm trying to give the correct Vaishnava interpretation according to our acharyas, Sridhar Maharaj, Govinda Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and at the same time present, why is this useful? Why should we read this? What's the importance? And Krishna is saying, the importance is not money. The importance is you're a human being. Learn to give. And to whom shall you give? Your wife and family? That's very animal. Dogs do that. Cats do that. I hear a lot of people all the time, if they're asked to make a reflection on life, they say, the most important thing is family. And okay, that's nice. It's like from the Godfather movie, family is the important thing. But my family was a disaster until I found the devotees of Krishna. And now I have a new family. So I feel like all of you are my family, because I know I can trust Dandi Maharaj with my life. I can trust Harimati with my life. Braja Sundari, I could probably trust her with my life. If somebody told me, if Avadut Maharaj tells me, go to Istanbul, Vrindavan Chandra will be there at the airport. Okay, I'm ready to go. I'll do it. Why? Because I know I can trust Vrindavan Chandra with my life. It's a very strange thing, isn't it? I can trust Harimati with my life. I was in Ukraine, right? Kiev. We were at the Veda Life thing. I don't know where I am. I have no idea. I don't have a return ticket back to Mexico. I don't know what time it is, because I'm, after a 20-hour flight, you're so jet lagged, you can't remember your name, you know? And she says, okay, come on, we're going over here, sit down, now preach. Okay, I'm ready for that. Why? Because she's my family, you're my family. Strange, no? I can call my sister up and say, hello, I need help. Can you help me? No. So I don't know if the most important thing is family, but Krishna says, Bhoktaram Jagya Tapasyam. All the tapasya, all the jagya, all the religion in the world, it's going towards me. So why not make it towards me? You can make it towards, Jah or Yahweh or, Jehovah or anybody else, the invisible God of the Quran. Okay, but it's coming to me, so why not? Raso Vaisa, I'm the power. I'm the source of all the nectar and the honey. You take a look at Yahweh. Where's the nectar there? There's no nectar. He ends the Old Testament with the words, lest I smite the earth with a curse. And, Yahweh, he's always sending a plague of locusts down to Israel. He's sending a plague of snakes to Israel. But Krishna doesn't do that. He doesn't send a plague of snakes. He plays with the snakes. He dances on the head of Kaliya, right? Kaliya Nag. And Kaliya Nag, he's a strange position. Is he an enemy of Krishna? Well, he gets the dust of the lotus feet of Krishna. Krishna actually dances on his head. So, is he an enemy? Not really. So that's how Krishna ends the chapter. He says, whatever you're thinking about in terms of karma and renunciation, it's all aimed at me. Bhoktaram Jagya Tapasa. So, my dear friends, I thank you again for allowing me to speak. I am only able to speak because you're giving me some power. What Sutta Goswami spoke in front of 10,000 sages at Naimisharanya was empowered. Normally, he couldn't speak like that. He was a sutta. The word sutta is interesting because Karna is often criticized for being the son of a sutta. He's Sutta Putra, right? The son of a sutta. It's like it's a low position. But Krishna is also a sutta when he drives the chariot of Arjuna. So sutta are known for storytelling. It's kind of interesting. If you ever drive a car with somebody, you have to sit for a long time in the car. What happens is somebody tells a story. You start telling stories back and forth. The drivers are very good at telling stories. So a sutta is a storyteller. And Sutta Goswami is like that. But he doesn't have the power to speak the Bhagavatam until he's in front of 10,000 sages. And the pressure of those sages, tell us. Okay, you told us the Mahabharata. Okay, that was all right. But go deeper. We want something substantial. And so Sutta Goswami says, well, okay, what I'm going to tell you now, Kaitava Dharma Projita, it doesn't have any Kaitava Dharma. There's no cheating Dharma in the Bhagavatam. In the Mahabharata, there's a little bit of cheating Dharma. You're told, do something bad, look at the Pandavas, they didn't follow the rules, they ended up in hell. There's some cheating Dharma there, but not in the Bhagavatam. It's pure transcendental Paramahansa Dharma. And how is Sutta empowered to be able to do that? Because he's surrounded by 10,000 sages in the forest of Naimisharanya. So normally I don't have any power to speak on the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very difficult text. It's a difficult thing to do. But by the power of your being here, by this Sangha, I have a little bit of ability to say something. I make some notes, you know. You can tell I'm reading something from my notes, but the pressure of being in front of great souls like yourself saves me from saying something stupid. So, does anybody have any questions?
Oh, Maharaj, yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Actually, today we discuss the chanting of holy name in the divine presence of Srila Masud Maharaj. And it was famous shloka from maybe Padma Purana, I don't know, but it quoted in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. А так Шри Кришна Намади Напхавет Грах Яминдрия Севанмуки Хиджих Вада Своя Васпарати, да. Position of our Guru Varga, Saraswati Thakur, was that Seva is most important. So they put Seva over the chanting, just chanting. They put they stress upon Seva. And so it's a discussion about quality of rounds. Someone says you should chant 64 rounds and maybe even more. And someone said you should chant 16 rounds. Why in your mission do not chant 16 rounds? Why only 4 rounds, etc. questions. But in the perspective of this chapter of Bhagavad Gita, actually Krishna himself stress the activity. So active seva. He put above renunciation, like for example meditation, etc. So he asked Arjuna to fight, not just sit and relax, but you have to fight. But someone may be reading and books and writing books, or something else, or trading somewhere to keep money for mission, etc. But actually, activity is most important for Krishna. I don't know, is it right understanding or not so right, or not so right? Because of course we should chant rounds, of course, no problem. We should, but actually we also we have to do something practical, and to have to do something practical for seva, for preaching is most important. So is it right understanding or not? Or maybe you have
That's a very nice reflection, Maharaj. On this point, Srila Sridhar Maharaj would often mention the role played in the mission by Krishnadas Babaji, who was a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, he liked to spend a long time in the jungle chanting on his beads. And also he liked to participate in bhajans and kirtans. He was a great singer. Once upon a time, he had to visit the doctor for his heart. And the doctor listened to his heart with a stethoscope. And Babaji Maharaj said, well, what do you think? And the doctor said, I can hear the drums and kartals of the kirtan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in your heart. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I think it's a good thing. But here's a person who is very much absorbed in Krishna consciousness, far superior to me. But at one point, he was criticized by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he said, you know, I don't want people to follow his example. The famous quote is, I don't consider sitting in the jungle of Panihati pulling beads to be a service. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur stressed service. Srila Sri Damar stressed service. Srila Prabhupada stressed service. And Srila Govinda Maharaj stressed service. As at one point, we went, after Srila Sri Maharaj's disappearance, we went to him and said, okay, what's the next book? And Govinda Maharaj says, there's not enough books. It's time to do some service. So insofar as the great modern preachers of Bhakti and Vaishnavism stress service, and in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself is stressing service. It seems to me that your reflection is a correct one. I would say, another point is this. There's a saying, the idle mind is the devil's workshop. So it may be that your fingers are moving and your mouth is moving and you're saying the holy name, but your mind is in a different place. There's the story of the two monks. You know the story. There are these two monks. I think they're Buddhists in the story, but they could be Hare Krishna devotees. Why not? You know, they have to cross the river. They're on parikram. They're going to a holy place, a temple. So they come to the river to cross, and it's a little dangerous. There's a young monk and an old monk. And as they're thinking about, how am I going to cross this river? A young girl appears. Maybe she's 17, 18, very good looking, very sweet. She turns to the monks and says, I need to cross the river to go to the market. Can you help me across? And the young monk, young sannyasi, looks at her and thinks, oh my God, you know, this is a woman, I can't touch her. My vows are in danger. Certainly not. No, I'm not going to help you. You know, I'm very, very sorry, but find some other way. You're going to the market, making money? No. But the older monk looks at her and says, yeah, okay, hop on my shoulders. So, you know, he takes the woman on his shoulders, crosses the river, lets her down on the other side. She says, oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And the monk says, well, you should come and visit the temple sometime. Oh, yes, I will. And they start walking. And they walk about 8 hours. And finally, it's nighttime. They make a little fire. They still have a long way to go. And they're just about to go to sleep when the young monk turns to the old monk and he says, I have a question for you. The old monk says, yeah, what's that? He says, well, why did you take that woman across the river? She was young, she was beautiful. You're not supposed to touch a woman, you know that. Why? And the old monk turns to the young one and he says, well, let me see. I carried that woman for 1 minute when I was crossing the river. You have carried her now for 8 hours. Why are you carrying this woman in your mind? I left her at the river. And the young monk is like, that's pretty good, right? So what are you carrying in your mind when you're chanting those 64 rounds? Are you thinking money, 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 Hare Krishna, sex, yeah, Hare Krishna, money, 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 Hare Krishna. or, what's really in your mind? Are you able to make your mind completely blank while you're vibrating the holy name? Are you really vibrating the holy name? What is the quality of that vibration? Was something that interested Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So what is the quality there? Are you chanting the holy name with offenses? Are you thinking, I have to do this? Oh God, I have to chant my japa. One more. Oh God, I have to do this. What? Oh, somebody's coming to the house. One more. Somebody's coming to, the phone is ringing. I have messages on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Who's there? Or are you absorbing yourself in the holy name? So if you chant one holy name purely, and Krishna appears on your tongue and dances and plays his flute, can you go the rest of the day walking through Calcutta collecting rice for the temple? What's better? Collecting rice for the temple, walking from cloth shop to cloth shop, begging and getting turned away, and then coming back to the temple with some rice for the devotees so the pujari who's waving the incense can eat. Or, not that this would ever happen, but you're the pujari and you're thinking money, sex, drugs, power, I am, me, as you're waving the incense. So, where is the real service? That's a very, very difficult thing, Maharaj, And as the leader of the devotees over there, it's your business to try to be a good example and guide the surrendered souls there and see to it that they're happily engaged in service and they're happily chanting the holy name. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj did not insist on 16 rounds. Srila Prabhupada did. Bhaktisiddhanta insisted on 64 perhaps, but that was a different time and place. A good preacher knows, Kala Desha Patra, time, place, and circumstance. So those things I think are to be taken into consideration. You might find support for that in the Golden Volcano of Divine Love, where Srila Sridhar Maharaj explains the Shikshashtakam. But thank you for your question. You always make me think about how to be a better devotee and a better human being. Anything else? Any more questions?
Mahayogi Prabhu, I always have questions.
But
just already, I don't know, you're with us for an hour and a half. I'm not sure that you have time to answer questions.
I can do another 10 minutes before I'm really tired. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I need to choose. What are the questions?
I'll try to be brief. Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned today ego. So the question is, what is ego?
Well, in Western parlance, ego has a particular meaning because of Freud and psychologists and people like that. So ego is not really a perfect translation, I suppose. But in Sanskrit, the word is ahankara, which means I do. I am the doer. In a sense, like the word kara, koro in Bengali, or kriyar, it means to create. So it's kind of like saying, I am the creator, I'm God, or I am the center of the universe. So that's the mentality. Ego means I'm thinking, it's all about me. It's not you. Maybe my family a little bit, my daughter, my son, I love them. Why? Because it's mini me. It's a little me. That's my daughter, she's me. My brother is kind of me, but not so much. My mommy is like mega me or ur me. She was the me before me, but the important thing is me. So aham, Carl, I do it. So that's ego.
Yes, thank you. And another question is, can we say that this material world is created especially for us, for souls in ignorance?
Yeah, I don't know about it especially, that has a color to it, but yeah, it's created for us. Mm-hmm. What I kind of understand is this. The reality that we experience as phenomenon is some kind of a collaboration, if you will, between our subjective consciousness and some kind of an objective world. The objective world exists, it's real, but it's held in place, it's held together by consciousness. Without consciousness, it doesn't exist. Now, does that mean that I created the world? No, because there's millions and millions and millions of souls involved. So it's kind of a sort of a collective consciousness, mass hypnosis hologram that's also held in place. Now, that's not enough. It's not enough that the jivas dream the world. God also dreams the world. Right? We have Mahavishnu. Who is Mahavishnu? The idea of Mahavishnu is it's the deity in a half-conscious state, or partially sleeping, yoga nidra, sort of casting a wild glance over material nature, some feminine aspect. So another way to look at that is that particular, if you analyze it, that particular glance that he casts in the form of energy is Shambhu or Shiva. And it's cast towards the material energy, which is Prakriti or Deva, the goddess. So in a sense, the world creation has to do with a tangible material energy of time, space, different material elements in a kind of nascent state. And what's cast into that are those souls who are interested in this experience. And that combination brings about the phenomenal world. So the phenomenal world that we experience, it's real, but it's not as real as the physical scientists wish to claim with their materialistic point of view, because their point of view excludes consciousness. It's not an entirely ideal concept. We don't subscribe to an extreme form of idealism where you create the world, because you don't. You're not responsible for earthquakes and tsunamis and plagues of locusts and snakes, right? That's beyond you. But somehow we are hypnotized into this sort of a trance where we accept physical reality as the thing on the basis of ahankara or ego, thinking, I am the creator, I have done this. Only sometimes we realize, oh, there's no internet. I'm not the creator. How did that happen? when the internet is on, I'm the God. I'm speaking to my millions of followers on Facebook and YouTube. Do what I say, sleep, send me money. But then suddenly the internet goes down and oops, I'm not God anymore. What happened? I don't control the weather and the sun and the moon and the rain. So this hard physical reality that we have before us, it's impossible to really define. One, because you need consciousness and observation to define it. It doesn't exist outside of observation. And two, that particular reality depends on what the point of view is. If I see it from this point of view, it's a square. If I look at it from that point of view, it's a circle. So which is it, square or circle? If I take a, right? If I show you this, it's obviously a rectangle, right? If you look at it this way, oh no, it's a circle, right? It's a circle. Is it a circle or a rectangle? Well, everything is like that, depending on your perspective and your point of view. So in order to construct an accurate picture of reality, we need to take into consideration lots of different perspectives. And perspective means observer, and observer means consciousness. So this is a hard problem for science. Where does reality begin and where does consciousness leave off? Madhvacharya, he came down very strictly. He said, no, there's soul and there's matter. There's God and there's soul. There's God and there's matter. And people like Madhvacharya because it's easier to understand like that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says, well, the soul is divine, but the soul is not divinity. The divinity is spiritual, but it's not soul. Soul and matter are somehow intertwined with this agency that we call the three modes of material nature, Raja, Sattva, and Tama. But soul is not matter. Sometimes matter appears to have a spiritual reality. Look at the virus. The virus is not a living being, and yet it reproduces. It acts like a living being. How is that possible? Hi, there she is. Hello, I see you. Good night. Buenas noches. So, what was your question about creation?
Yes, the question was, can we say that this material world is created only for us, souls in ignorance?
Yeah, is created. That's passive, There are many different elements involved in the creation, put it that way. It's not so simply conceived as to say that an omniscient God created the world in 7 days. We don't say that. We say, well, there was this entity called Brahma who he spins the creation out of a golden lotus at the top of, that grows from the navel of God himself, who is Mahavishnu dreaming the world. It's a very subtle mythological explanation, if you like. But if you look at all the worlds and planets spinning in outer space, if you look at that from a particular perspective, over time, you take a time-lapse photograph of the Milky Way spinning through millions and millions of years, it may look like a lotus. If you think, oh, we're talking about this world, the Earth planet, no, it did not come from a lotus. It is not standing on elephants. The elephants are not standing on turtles. This is stupid and ridiculous. That's not the only explanation given, right? We talk about Hiranyagarbha, which is described in the Vedas and the Purusha Shukta. which says, in the beginning, there was no God and there was God. There was no thing and there was thing. It's a very weird shloka, Purusha Shukta in the Vedas, right? But it talks about the Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg. There was a huge golden egg. Was it really made of gold? Or what element was that? You know, in what century was gold isolated as an element and added to the periodic table? Well, I don't remember. But gold, the golden egg, was it golden in color? Was it a chicken egg, you know, or a fish egg? Was it a reptile egg? You know, some of this language may be metaphoric, but the idea that there was some universal shape and that it was shaped like an ellipsis and it was three-dimensional, like an egg, and that out of that consciousness somehow combines with matter. It's very difficult to ferret out, but it's one thing to try to understand reality on the basis of a scriptural text and think, well, part of this might be metaphoric, part of it might be mythological, but it seems to me that there's an important relationship between consciousness and matter, and that relationship is discussed here in the Vedas, and perhaps my guru can enlighten me on that. This is a more interesting position to me than that everything is matter. We don't know what matter is. I can't tell you what that is, but that's what it is. It's all matter. There's no consciousness. There's no soul. If anything like soul exists, it's an epiphenomenon of the brain. Some brain stuff got together with some electrical stuff and they had a dance. And then you're thinking about reality. That's all we know. That's not a good explanation. It's another form of mythology. So given that science is a mythology and the Vedas are a mythology, I prefer the explanation given by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Because what is he telling you here? He's giving you a firm basis for an ethical society. Don't base it on money. Base it on giving. Give to God. And he says, he's very ecumenical. Whatever you conceive God to be, do your work for God. Well, I'll work it out in the end because Bhoktaram Jagyat Tapasam. I'm receiving all the sacrifice, all the gifts flow to me in the end. So live your life on the basis of Krishna consciousness, God consciousness. I think that's a good message. Anyways, I'm sorry. You have another question? We don't want to bore people. I'm trying to go quickly.
No, I think that my questions are finished. I don't see any questions in the chat.
Everybody's happy. Okay.
Yes, so thank you very much for this wonderful talk. I want to ask you, next week we will speak about the 6th chapter, yes?
Yeah, that's the idea. I don't think I can do it in one go. That's a big, long chapter. Mm-hmm. You know, it'll probably take 2 episodes. Sure. But okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so get your yoga on. Get your yoga on. My name, by the way, is Mahayogi. When Sri Maharaj gave me that name, it was Bhaktivedanta Mahayogi. I said, what does that mean? And he said, it means one whose conclusion is that bhakti is the highest yoga. And that's the purport of the 6th chapter. So yeah, get your yoga on. Make your little energy ball, breathe, and feel the energy. Anyways, thanks for joining us here from Israel, from Ukraine, from Russia, from Spain, from the United States, and wherever else, Ireland. wherever else you may be. And we'll see you next week, same time, same station. Thank you, Rajasundari.
Oh, thank you, Mahayogi Prabhu. Mahayogi Prabhu ki jai. Jai Mahayogi Prabhu.
Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Yes, so
Dandavat.
Dandavats, please accept our obeisances. Dandavats, see you next week. Hare Krishna. Bye-bye.
Hare Krishna.